10 states where black travelers still plan their day around sundown towns. And no, this isn't a history segment. The signs came down. The detour didn't. By the end of this, you'll know which 10 states still route you through a town that ran people out, and why each one sits exactly where it sits. This November, this country throws Route 66 a 100th birthday party. Congress appointed a whole commission for it. The brochures are already at the printer, selling you the freedom of the open road. Here's the part the brochure skips. In 1930, 44 of the 89 counties along that same road had no motel and no restaurant that would take you, and wanted black folks gone before dark. 44 out of 89. On the road they're throwing the party for. A Harlem postal worker named Victor Green published a guidebook for exactly that problem, every single year from 1936 to 1966. So here's how this list is ranked, because you're going to ask. Not hate crime stats, not how white a state is, not even how many sundown towns it used to have. One thing only: the gap between the map the tourism board prints and the map you still keep in your head. And nobody's enforcing anything today. That died in court 60 years ago. What didn't die is the math you run at 6 p.m. with 100 miles left. And number 1 has more of them on the map than any other state in America. Hit subscribe and let's count it down. Number 10, Oregon. Oregon likes to lead with the hiking, the farmer's market, and the reusable cup it brought from home. It's the state that put "Keep it weird" on a bumper sticker and sold the rest of us the coast, the pines, and Crater Lake at sunrise. Progressive, green, and very confident it's one of the good ones. Now let's be clear about what that state actually did on paper. Oregon is the only free state ever admitted to the Union with a black exclusion clause written into its constitution. That was 1857. The Oregon Historical Society will tell you the earlier version, back in 1844, called for whipping black people who stayed, 39 lashes, repeated every 6 months until they left. The last of those laws wasn't repealed until 1926. 1926. Your grandmother was alive. And here's where Oregon gets a little credit it's actually earned. The state publishes that timeline itself. Schools teach it. The Historical Society puts the ugly parts on its own website with dates attached, which is more than most states on this list will do. But the Tougaloo College database still lists 24 Oregon towns as confirmed or suspected sundown towns, and one of them is Grants Pass. In 1924, a newspaper down there ran an editorial headlined, "Let's Keep Grants Pass a White Man's Town." Grants Pass sits directly on Interstate 5, and Interstate 5 is the only real north-south artery through the western half of that state. So if you're a black family driving up from California to see Portland, you don't get to decide whether you pass through. The highway decides for you, about 4 hours before you arrive. So Oregon opens this list at number 10 instead of closing it. The gap between the printed map and the one in your head is real here. It's just the smallest gap on the board. Oregon kept its receipts. Number 9, Ohio. Ask somebody who grew up black in Ohio which towns they were told never to stop in, and watch how fast that list comes out. Not looked up. Remembered. Ohio sells itself as the crossroads. It's the state you cross to get to a better one. 3 interstates cutting through it, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on the lake, Cedar Point in the summer, and about 400 miles of everything else. James Loewen, the sociologist who spent his career mapping this, wrote that the evidence suggests more than half of all towns in Ohio could be considered sundown towns. That's his estimate, not a head count, and he said so. It's still more than half of a state. His research names Waverly, Niles, and Syracuse. Tougaloo's database carries testimony from Wapakoneta, including residents recalling a sundown sign. And everybody in this country blames the wrong half of the map. A national dataset published in the journal Scientific Data in 2025 mapped 2,248 places with Sundown town histories, and 1,821 of them sit outside the former Confederate South. That same dataset found them in all but one of the lower 48 states. Everybody in this country blames Mississippi. The math keeps pointing at the Midwest. Wapakoneta is where they built the museum to the first man who walked on the moon. We put a man on the moon and named the museum after his hometown, and that same hometown couldn't handle a black family stopping for gas. Now, don't get it twisted. Ohio's cities are black cities. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton. Real institutions, real neighborhoods, real history. This state didn't invent anything the rest of the Midwest wasn't already doing. But that's the problem for a black traveler. Nobody warns you about a state you're only driving through. You're not booking Ohio. You're refueling in Ohio, at 9 at night, at an exit you picked because it had a sign. Ohio lands at number 9 because nobody's selling you Ohio. You're just driving through it. A brochure never has to lie about a place it isn't advertising. It just has to stay quiet. Number 8, Texas. You're on Interstate 10 heading east out of Houston. 90 minutes in, the exit signs start looking exactly like every other exit sign in America. Gas, food, lodging, 24 hours, next right. Nothing on that sign tells you the town is Vidor. Texas sells the drive. The Gulf run from Houston to New Orleans is one of the great American road trips, and every tourism board along it will tell you so. Boudin, blues, and a straight shot east. Vidor was known as a sundown town by 1930, and a sundown sign stood out on Interstate 10 until the federal government had them taken down in 1988. That's not the 1930s. That's the year of the Seoul Olympics. And when the 2000 census came around, it counted 8 black residents in a town of roughly 11,440. 8 people. In a town of 11,000, that's 1 black resident for every 1,400 neighbors. In 1993, the town protested an attempt to integrate a local public housing project, and the integration didn't hold. And this is why a corridor matters more than a county. Miji's 2025 travel research found that 79% of black travelers prefer road trips, averaging 247 miles one way. 247 miles is about 4 hours. 4 hours is 1 tank of gas, 1 bathroom stop, and at least 1 town. Nobody in that car had time to look up. Now Texas has an argument on the other side, and it's a big one. Texas has the largest black population of any state in the country, just under 3,955,000 at the 2020 census. Houston and Dallas are 2 of the strongest black metros in America. This state wants you. Whole cities of it want you. So Texas takes number 8, and not higher, because 4 million people are a real answer to 1 town. But 8 is not 0. One of the most advertised drives in America runs right past that exit. Nothing on it says Vidor. Number 7, Indiana. Indiana wants to talk about basketball, the Indy 500, and hospitality, and somehow never gets around to the 1920s. Which is impressive, because in the 1920s, this state was the national headquarters of the thing we're all politely not naming. The tourism copy calls it the Crossroads of America, corn, courtesy, and a very loud month of May. By some estimates, Indiana had as many as 200 sundown towns. 200, and the one that still comes up in every conversation is Martinsville, where in 1968, a young black woman named Carol Jenkins was selling encyclopedias door to door and was stabbed to death in the street. That case sat unsolved for 34 years, until a witness finally came forward in 2002. Martinsville isn't even the only one with paperwork. Lowen profiled 3 Indiana towns in his book, and Elwood was one of them, with a documented history as a Klan stronghold and a public library that somehow stopped having the records about it. Now let's be fair. Bloomington is a college town that genuinely wants you there. Indianapolis has a black population with deep roots and real political weight. But look at a map. The main road from Indianapolis down to the Indiana University campus runs straight through Martinsville. A black parent driving a freshman to move-in day doesn't get to route around it. There's one road, there's a trunk full of dorm supplies, and there's a name on the green sign that everybody in that car recognizes and nobody says out loud. That's the whole tension of this state in one drive. You're delivering your kid to a place that wants them, through a place that has never once said it does. Indiana is number 7 for one reason. The route isn't optional. The fewer roads you get, the wider that gap opens. On that drive, you get one. Number 6, Tennessee. Everybody warns you about Mississippi. Nobody warns you about the mountains. That's the trick of this state. Tennessee sells you Nashville, Dollywood, and the Smokies, and it sells them hard. Great Smoky Mountains National Park logged 11,527,939 recreation visits in 2025, according to the Park Service. More than any national park in America. Not top 5. First, by millions. Up in the northeast corner, in Unicoi County, sits Irwin. On May 19, 1918, a black man named Tom DeVert was lynched there, and the town's entire black population was expelled. Not reduced. Expelled. 108 years later, that county has never gotten them back. At the 2020 census, 44 people in all of Unicoi County identified as black. 0.2%. And here's what makes Irwin different from every other name on this list. The Appalachian Trail runs 51 of its 2,175 miles through Unicoi County. The Trail Conservancy named the county a gateway community back in 2009, only the 4th one ever to get it. Somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 hikers walk through Irwin every spring. To be fair to Irwin, that trail economy is small, local, and by most accounts hospitable. Hikers get fed. Hikers get shuttled. Nobody's running anybody out of town in 2026. But the trail guide will tell you where to resupply, where to shower, and where the good burger is. It has nothing to say about 1918. That's a strange gap in a document that lists every outhouse on the mountain. But a black hiker coming off the trail with 100 miles on their legs is looking at a town name, checking the sun, and running the daylight budget. How much light is left, and how far the next option is. Not because anything is going to happen. Because of what did, and because nobody around here ever said it out loud afterward. 11.5 million visitors. One town of 6,000 that emptied itself out in 1918. Which of those two numbers do you think made the tourism site? That's Tennessee, at number 6. The outdoor brand got built directly on top of the town. The trail literature never mentions 1918. 5 down, 5 to go. If this breakdown is landing, tap the like button, subscribe for the next state broken down the same way, and turn the bell on so it actually reaches you. Now, the back half. Number 5, Kentucky. Picture the exit. 2 lanes peeling off Interstate 75, a brown state park sign, and about 15 minutes down the road, a waterfall that does something no other waterfall in this hemisphere does. Cumberland Falls throws a moonbow, a rainbow made by moonlight. Kentucky State Parks will tell you it's the only place in the Western Hemisphere where you can reliably see one, and they're right. The town at that exit is Corbin. On October 30th and 31st, 1919, an armed white mob in Corbin went house to house, rounded up the black residents, marched roughly 200 men, women, and children to the train station, and put them on railcars out of town. 200 people, loaded like freight, in 2 days. At the 2020 census, black residents made up 0.56% of Corbin's population. Tougaloo's project still carries Corbin as a probable sundown town. Corbin has earned something here, and it's the strongest reckoning on this whole list. Since 2019, the town has held public events on racial justice. City officials issued a proclamation acknowledging what happened in 1919. There's a community organization called the Sunup Initiative built specifically to sit with that history instead of burying it. The town is doing the work. The tourism copy is not. That page found room for the moonbow, the cabins, the fishing, and the gift shop. The one thing it couldn't fit was a year, because a black family planning a weekend at that waterfall reads a page about moonbows, sees a photo of the falls at midnight, books a cabin, and finds out about 1919 the way most of us find out about anything, from a comment section 3 days before the trip. And by then you already paid for the cabin, and you're sitting there deciding whether you even tell your mother where you're going. Kentucky ends up at number 5 because the brochure and the expulsion share the same exit off 75. Only one of them got advertised. Number 4, Georgia. Forsyth County, Georgia, should be the very last place on a list like this. It sits 40 minutes north of the Black cultural capital of America. So why is it here? Because Atlanta is the strongest welcome mat in the country, and Forsyth County spent 70 years being the opposite of it. Atlanta is where black families move on purpose. Atlanta is the reason half the people watching this have a cousin in Georgia. In 1912, white residents forcibly expelled more than 1,000 black residents from Forsyth County. That was roughly 1 in 10 people in the county gone. The New Georgia Encyclopedia records the county as 100% white from 1920 straight through 1940, and at the 1990 census, Forsyth County had 44,083 residents. 14 of them were black. 14. In 1990, the year Home Alone came out. But here's where Georgia starts telling on itself. In 1956, the Army Corps of Engineers flooded about 60 square miles of Forsyth County to build Lake Lanier, and the land that went under included Oscarville, the black community at the center of what happened in 1912. You'll hear people online say that lake is haunted. It isn't. The land those families farmed is still down there under the boat traffic. That's not a ghost story. That's a survey map. Now, the county has not stood still. More than 15,000 people marched through Forsyth in 1987 and put it on every front page in America. The population went from 16,928 in 1970 to 98,407 by 2000, and it's about 3.6% black today. The county has even funded a scholarship for descendants of the families who were driven out, which is more repair than most places on this list have attempted. So this isn't a county frozen in 1912. It's a county that got rich, got crowded, and got a lake, in that order. Georgia holds number 4, and Atlanta is the reason, not the excuse. The metric here is the gap, and the gap gets wider the louder a state advertises the welcome. Georgia sells black families the strongest yes in America, then routes their weekend into a county that spent 70 years as the loudest no. The boat rental page never says Oscarville. Number 3, Arkansas. Arkansas sells the Ozarks, and it sells them like they're the only thing it's got. Hills, lakes, float trips, a highway winding north through some of the prettiest country in the middle of this map. And US 65 carries you right up through Harrison on the way to Branson. Harrison is the part nobody puts on the float trip flyer. White mobs drove all 115 black residents out of Harrison in 2 riots, in 1905 and in 1909. The Southern Poverty Law Center puts the town today at about 90% white and 0.6% black, which is not a coincidence, it's an outcome. And in 2013, a billboard went up outside town, reading, "Anti-racist is a code word for anti-white." It made national news, again, in a decade nobody can claim was the past. Here's why that matters more than the history does. A 2024 study by TripAdvisor and Group Black found that 44% of black travelers judge whether a place is safe first by how racially and culturally diverse it is, not by crime data, not by reviews, by who's already there. And Harrison, by that measure, answers the question before anybody gets out of the car. Now, The town has fought back on its own reputation, and that part is real. Residents put together a race relations task force. City leaders put up their own billboard welcoming visitors, featuring Ebony Mitchell, Miss Arkansas 2022, who grew up there. But a billboard is not a history book, and nobody reads one that way. A black family driving 65 north with kids in the back is not weighing a task force against a sign. They're doing 65 miles an hour past a message somebody paid money to put there. That puts Arkansas at number 3. On this state's main tourist road, that reputation isn't sitting in a history book. Somebody pays to keep it up. Number 2. Missouri. One state on this list comes with a warning label, and it wasn't written by a blogger. It was written by the NACP. In 2017, the NACP issued the first statewide travel advisory in its history, and it named Missouri. The advisory tells African American travelers, visitors, and Missourians to stay notably alert and exercise extreme caution moving through the state. It doesn't stop at black travelers either. It covers women, seniors, people with disabilities, religious minorities, and the LGBT community. The Missouri NACP says it's still in effect today. Say that out loud. An advisory for an American state, and it's still active. That's the kind of language the State Department uses about somewhere you need a passport to reach. Meanwhile, Branson pulls about 7.2 million visitors a year and roughly $1.7 billion into that local economy, and Missouri kept running national tourism campaigns straight through it. The state didn't argue with the advisory. It just kept buying ad time next to it. Give Branson this much. That money is real. Those jobs are real, and plenty of black families have had a completely fine weekend there. But think about what that state is actually mailing you. 2 envelopes about the same place. One says, "Come see the shows, bring the grandkids, stay the weekend." The other says, "Exercise extreme caution." Both of them are current. Both of them are official. So which one do you think gets printed on a billboard? And the Sundown history is the reason that advisory exists in the first place. Lowen found that similar shares of towns went sundown in Missouri as in Illinois and Indiana, which is a polite academic way of saying the Ozarks did not fill up by accident. Missouri comes in at number 2 because it's the only state on this list where the warning is official, in writing, and still standing, and the brochure kept printing anyway. Every other gap on this board is an omission. This one is a decision. Number 1. Illinois. Illinois is a state with 2 completely different reputations depending on how far south you drive. The one it sells you starts at Adams Street in Chicago, under a brown sign, where Route 66 begins. Every Centennial article this fall is going to start on that corner. The Mother Road, the open highway, 100 years of Americana. Drive 5 hours south of that sign and you're in Union County, at a town called Anna. Here's the number that puts this state at number 1. James Lowen documented 472 sundown towns in Illinois, out of 621 incorporated places over 1,000 people. Not a handful, not a region, but the clear majority of the towns in an entire state. And Lowen was careful with himself, which is more than most people quoting him manage. His national estimate was a range, at least 3,000 towns and maybe as many as 15,000, and he said flat out he could never pin it down. The 472 in Illinois isn't an estimate. That one he counted. In November of 1909, a white mob in Cairo lynched a black man named William James. Afterward, black workers at a quarry near Anna were driven out of the area. At the 2010 census, Anna was 95.7% white, and ProPublica found its black population had barely moved since about 1980. You've probably heard what people say the town's name stands for. ProPublica went looking for a single document proving it, and came back with nothing. The town was named for Anna Davy, the founder's wife, in 1854, which is true, and which changes nothing, because a rumor that survives 117 years has stopped being a rumor and started being a warning. The mayor there told ProPublica, "It's a shame that wording is even out there, and that it isn't the Anna he knows. And he's probably telling the truth about the Anna he knows. That's the whole problem. He knows one Anna. Your family was handed a different one." And that's the part that never makes a brochure. You're not scared of a town of 4,000 people. You're tired. Tired of running the daylight budget in a country you pay taxes in. Tired of a 100-year-old rumor still doing a job that no sign, no law, and no court order is doing anymore. Illinois is number one because the road this whole country is about to celebrate starts right here. Nobody built more of that map. The sign was never the point. The map was. Take down every sign in America, and the routing survives, because it's been handed down at kitchen tables for 4 generations. If you're planning a drive, check the route, not the state. Tougaloo College keeps a free state-by-state map of this. And there's a modern green book now, where Black travelers rate the places they actually stopped. Now argue with me. Which state did I rank too low, and which one on this list would you defend? Drop it below. Tap like if this was worth your time, and subscribe if you want the next state broken down the same way. Until next time, check the route, book the daylight, and get where you're going while the sun's still up.